Did you get the impression, Wes, that Oswald was put together and was a CIA operation that put him together and moved him around like a chess piece on a board?
I would have to guess that he probably was, because someone traveling the way Oswald did normally would not be able to do so without the CIA knowing it. Now, when one of my buddies that I used to work with in Chicago tells me that Oswald was an informant, but Jim Hosty is supposed to deep six the informant file, you don't need to ask any more questions.
The implication is there, and everybody understands it.
Oh yeah, everybody understands that. Hoover wants it this way, and so we're going to do it that way.
Would you say Hoover liaised with the CIA on this, likely, and your impression and other agents' impressions? Would there have to be some liaising?
My guess would be no, because Hoover didn't like CIA. Now, that doesn't mean that he wouldn't talk to them, but just...
The rivalry.
Oh, absolutely. There was a rivalry with the large police departments. I mean, we were not allowed to talk to the police department in Chicago. We had a liaison agent. You be the liaison agent. If I had a question, would you go over and ask Detective so-and-so if he knows anything about such a... I can't pick up the phone and call Detective so-and-so.
Do you know who the liaison agent was between FBI or Hoover and the Dallas field office and the CIA?
No. Okay. No, each field office had a liaison agent.
So they did have, it's confirmable that each office did have a liaison agent.
Oh, yes, yeah, they did. And when I got permission to give photographs to the CIA in Chicago, my supervisor suggested giving it to the liaison. I said, I told you the CIA is going to get these directly from me, because I don't know what's going to happen.
Right, you might have been concerned that something may happen onto the photographs, and then they misinterpreted the photograph you gave them. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to lead you back west to Chicago and the known Chicago plot, the plot on the JFK. Are you familiar with that, based on the Edwin Black story about the Chicago plot to assassinate JFK and what was going on there before Dallas? Was there some plot you were heard of?
The Abraham Bolden story?
The Abraham Bolden story?
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah,
I did not know about it at the time. Now, if I had known someone like Bolden when I was in Chicago, I might have picked up the telephone and called him and said, "Hey, Abraham, guess what I heard?" But normally, no. There's no way I would have called the Secret Service, because if Hoover found out that I was calling Secret Service, he'd probably fire me.
I'm just wondering, the reason I asked that is because we mentioned a liaison person, so I'm just wondering if it's possible the Chicago liaison individual to the CIA or the Secret Service, did they connect with the Secret Service as well in terms of liaising?
They should be. I mean, it's my understanding that they did.
Because if there was an uncovered plot unfolding at the time that was broken up, who would be in the loop to understand those dynamics, and how far would that information be passed around? I'm just waiting for our black helicopter to go over.
It's Magnum PI.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because there certainly was a plot brewing as well as in Miami as well, from the documentation. I'm just wondering who would be investigating that, because they did go and arrest somebody, I understand, or intercepted an individual. I forget his name.
I don't know whether it.
I mean, did that come across your way at all in the Chicago office?
No.
Okay.
None of that came across. Now, if it had come to Chicago, I would think that it might have gone to the top hoodlum squad.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say who would get it. It might have been one of the security squads.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't know.
But you weren't in
a
loop on that one, or spoke to anybody who
right,
said, "Hey,
we had
post discussions on it."
We had about 5 different security squads, and so if it went to one, you'd never hear about it unless you went to lunch with an agent who was on that squad, and he'd talk to you about it. But
only to a certain limit, you're saying they wouldn't.
I never discussed with other agents what I was doing. I never even discussed with my late wife what I was doing.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Wes, because Len and I were discussing before how these agencies are very compartmentalized. Would you say, I mean, you mentioned 5 or 6 different elements a moment ago. Was that they were very compartmentalized, very in on their own? They wouldn't speak to each other, although you may see them socially or at lunch, but they were very self-contained?
The FBI itself was self-contained because we had a criminal section and a security section, and unless you're going to lunch with somebody on the bank robbery squad, you never hear what's happening. You read it in the newspaper.
Right, so there really was no communication. Was there a liaison individual between any of the internal sections, do you believe?
If there were, it would be at the supervisory level. And that's the way most of it's handled, so that there's some control over the information.
Yeah, and you've had a very colorful background, very interesting. And one of the very interesting things that crops up, in addition to your work in the Kennedy thing, is also the connection to Jonestown. That's come up. I mean, it's a very colorful story. I understand it. Were you actually in Jonestown during that time?
No. What?
Or is that a misnomer?
No. What happened, I had retired in 1977, and a very good friend of mine knew that I was thinking of writing a book, and he suggested that I talk to someone at the New York Times. I don't know why he picked New York Times.
Yeah.
I think he had worked with a reporter with the New York Times on one of the cases that he worked on.
Yeah.
And I said, why do you say that? And they said, well, he said there's a rumor out that one of the local law enforcement organizations has offered to do a hit on me because the word somehow got out that I was going to blow the whistle on the FBI. So my good friend said, you better talk to the press first.
And blowing the whistle in terms of what? Just what you...
corruption.
Oh, okay. Right, yeah.
And the big thing was the framing of Geronimo Pratt for a murder he did not commit.
Is that the American Indian Movement?
No, that was Black Panther Party.
Oh, okay, right.
And I had gotten in touch with a person who does movies and writes books, and he put me in touch with an attorney by the name of Charles Gary, who is a very liberal attorney, very good, and he just happened to be the attorney for the Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
And so I met Charles, and we were on the same wavelength as far as honesty and integrity. He was on a different side. He was on the left side, and I was on the right side. But our purpose seemed to well. He said, you should get into court and tell your story. I said, Charles, no United States attorney in his right mind is going to bring me into court and have me testify about corruption in the FBI. I said, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
He said, well, we'll see what we can do. Anyway, getting back to Jonestown, I had written a 212-page manuscript, which I had titled FBI Chicanery. I didn't know what title to use. I was thinking of writing a book, but I thought, do that. I had given the 212-page manuscript to Charles Gary so that when we needed to work on something, I would have a concise record of it. What I didn't know at the time that I was talking to Charles Gary was that Jim Jones was a client of Charles Gary.
That's right. He was one of Gary and Mark Lane, I believe, were lawyers for the People's Temple.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what happened, I found out later, was that Charles Gary had given the key to some of the file drawers, and before the people were going down to Jonestown, they copied a lot of files. They had heard that Charles Gary had a former agent
Yes.
as a client. So they went through and they found my 212-page manuscript. They copied it. And they took a copy down there, and when the FBI went down to search, the FBI found a 212-page manuscript.
Right.
And that's when all hell broke loose.
Yeah. So you weren't actually at Jonestown. We can clear that up right now.
No, I was not in Jonestown.
Yeah.
My manuscript
Your
was.
manuscript was. And are you, just because a lot of individuals have connected Jonestown with the potential to the former MK Ultra program, and which is a program started by the CIA in the late 1950s. Are you familiar with any of that?
I've read about it, but
Other
I
than
don't know
reading-
anything about it, and I can't make
Yeah. Was there any
statements about it.
any FBI investigation of the People's Temple at the time? Do you know what was going down? I mean, you didn't
It
investigate.
could have been up in San Francisco, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
because you were part of. Were you part of the COINTELPRO?
Yes, yeah.
Right, and you were in Los Angeles investigating.
I was in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
primarily working the Weatherman Underground,
Right. Okay.
the Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn
Yeah.
and Jeff Jones.
And Jim Jones' name never surfaced as far as you know during that time period, because wasn't in terms of his San Francisco
Not
politics.
in any work that I was doing. I heard about him in the newspaper, but I read a lot of things in a newspaper and had nothing to do with my work, and so I didn't pay attention to it other
The
than
People's Temple. Then,
So that's
People's Temple.
Yeah, and it was so you haven't been up to Ukiah, California, at any time to look at them, or
No, I've been in the city of Ukiah, but only for personal travel.
right? Not during that time.
Not any
period in
business. No.
You also, as interesting is because when Larry Flint in the mid-1970s offered the $1 million reward in Hustler magazine, the two numbers to call to give information were Mark Lane's and yours, I understand. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
I'm just curious. That's very fascinating. How did you and Mark Lane end up together connecting with Larry Flint?
The writer that I heard about and got in touch with was the one who mentioned Charles Gary, and I can mention his name. It was Donald Freed.
Yes.
And he was giving a lecture at USC on I forget the title of the program, but I thought, well, I'm retired now, I can do what I want, so I'll go listen to one of his lectures. And it was very impressive, and I had known Donald Freed from my FBI work. I didn't work on any cases, but I knew of him. And so after the lecture, I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh yeah, I think you should meet Charles Gary." So I thought, well, it's okay with me. Well, Donald Freed and Mark Lane worked together, and they have done some movies and documentaries together.
Yeah.
And so when Larry Flint offered a $1 million reward, he hired Mark Lane. Well, I was retired, and Mark Lane had just heard about me, and so what better person to verify what Mark Lane is doing than to get a retired FBI agent?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I asked that, Wes, is because, shortly after that time period, Larry Flint was shot, of course, as we know, and it seemed to kind of dissipate or disappear. And I think
we should just take this right off.
Okay.
Take that right off. Our floor. We don't need our dining table cloth here.
Okay. Okay.
The information, because that did bring out, from what we understand, a lot of information was processed either through the number that called you or Mark Lane, and Larry Flint never published it. We're just wondering, is there any records or files of the information that was passed on? I mean, I would imagine it would be a compilation of hearsay and so forth, but did any interesting hard evidence come in from certain credible witnesses that you guys followed up on that were deemed credible?
As far as I know, all the information was turned over to Larry Flint's organization.
Oh, so Larry Flint does have it?
Well, could.
Is it possible Mark Lane... Did you ever see that information, Wes? Did you any information?
Some of it.
Anything in particular that stood out for you?
My job was to go through letters that people wrote in claiming the $1 million reward, and you wouldn't believe how weird some of the letters were. Like they say, we know that Oswald did it because I saw it on TV and other things, and I just showed it to Mark Lane. I said, Mark, you want to read it? No, just throw it away.
Yeah.
Now,
how many letters are you talking?
Yeah.
Tens, hundreds, thousands?
Well, probably a pile on the table here. I don't. It might be 100, 200, 300.
Right.
And some of them we went to interview people because they sounded
credible,
halfway truthful.
Any in particular you recall that you can share, that we can follow up on?
The most of them, I think I can categorize that people were trying to claim $1 million because they had seen something on TV. And that was probably about 95% of it. I don't remember any very reliable source. There was one who was doing some research, but again, it was from the newspapers, and I don't consider that having...
So no original researcher or no witness or a witness who was kept in the shadows over the years came out? Nobody came out of the woodwork?
No one, for instance, nobody that I know of wrote a letter claiming that he was on a grassy knoll and saw somebody else shoot. There was nothing like that.
Yeah. Anybody in any kind of intelligence or law enforcement come out with information?
Not that I know of. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen, because Mark Lane could have seen it before I saw it.
Yeah.
But everything that Mark Lane gave me was mostly just a pile of crap.
So it could have been pre-filtered then before you received
it could have.
Yeah. So, but it's possible that Mark Lane may have the original files or copies of it anyways. That's possible.
It could be.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah. But then if I were Mark Lane, I probably would have just thrown it away or picked up the phone and said, Mr. Flint, do you want copies of these letters that they saw the Zapruder film and they know who did it? Nope, throw them away. That would have been the end of that.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, Wes, from your experience as a FBI agent, did the FBI or any other intelligence agencies use individuals like as a dangle or to draw other people to them to give information or set up a false story to bring out witnesses on a particular crime or something you know what I mean? They set up somebody who's favorable to a particular group, and then
I'm sure that must have happened, because that would have come under what we would consider the COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program.
Yeah.
And I know of individuals over the years who were to set up situations whereby a person is either framed for something, and a good instance is the Geronimo Pratt. Okay, we had an informant who was a documented FBI informant. There were contact records, and he was known to Washington, D.C.
Right. And, of course, a lot of people are critical of some of the programs because, they seem to be agent provocateurs where people would infiltrate these things.
Many of them were.
Right. And I'm not familiar too much with your first book. Do you want to just maybe elaborate a little? You're talking about FBI chicanery earlier. And what was the title of your first book?
The first book that was published was FBI Secrets.
Right.
An Agent's Expose.
Right, expose. So when you think of that, you think that here's someone who was an insider in the FBI, worked there, and yet still there are things that need to be brought to the light that the public should know about. That because, like, even when we're just talking about the assassination here, but when you hear every indication from Hoover, the fix is in from day one, and there was advanced knowledge, that gives the indication that the whole system is corrupt, that there can be nothing more important than the killing of a removal of a president. And when that president's removed and there's no investigation and every agency sits on their hands, you think, well, if we can't trust the Secret Service to do an honest job or the CIA to do an honest job, it's just... It's kind of troubling because,
It's very troubling.
Yeah, right.
I was in the FBI for 25 years, and when I was working criminal work, that didn't happen. At least that I know of. It was in the... Hi, Tom.
Okay, go ahead. I guess what you were saying is in other investigations, this didn't happen. You said in when you were investigating robbery or something like there was no big. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, in the criminal division where agents work bank robberies and kidnappings and extortions, as far as I know, everything was pretty legitimate and on the up and up. And one controlling factor there that people have to remember is that you're eventually going to go into a court of law. And so you can't phony up the information because there's a defense attorney who's going to rip you apart. Now, in the security division, we're almost never going to go into court. So agents got to, after a while, well, we can do illegal searches because the information is never going to go into court, but we're gaining intelligence of who's a member of the Communist Party or whatever organization. And so Hoover thought, hey, this is great. Man, we can, add names to a list forever. And there was a clear distinction between the security division and the criminal division. So in the criminal division, you had to play by the rules.
Okay, why don't you just hang on for 1 second? I see you got a couple of notes there, so why don't you hold that thought? I just want to make sure we don't run out of tape. I'm going to change the tape here.